Good afternoon, everyone. That was a bit loud. My name's Jack Cullinane, and I'm the head of sales at Ripple in APAC. Terry, first of all, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, back in Singapore. I'm really excited to be part of APEX 2025.
Thank you. So let's start with a bit of background on yourself and how you found yourself in this digital asset custody world.
You know, my journey into digital asset custody, I think, is representative of really kind of the diversity that we see in the sector. Many of us started someplace else before we ended up in digital assets. And that's where I think really the dynamism of this industry lies. For myself, I started my career as an attorney at a large law firm in South Korea. At the time, I was advising traditional institutions with their regulatory compliance matters. But starting in 2015, 2016, I was getting a lot of inquiries from innovators who wanted to come into the digital asset space. And it was immediately apparent to me at the time that there was a disconnect between what the pioneers in this space were doing and the regulatory landscape that they were trying to navigate. And then it started increasing my curiosity in this space. And so I started looking at what the industry looked like from a regulatory standpoint, from a commercial standpoint. And Korea, even then, was really dominated by centralized exchanges. And there was a need, I felt, of a robust custodian model that was really underdeveloped and underserved. And so in 2022, myself, along with my co-founder, we wanted to start BDAX, a digital asset custodian, to build out really a robust, institutional-focused custody infrastructure to add value and to add an element of custodial infrastructure into Korea, which I knew was going to be a significant market in the world.
Can you tell us a bit more about BDAX and how you differentiate yourselves in the digital asset market in Korea?
Our company, BDAX, is a fully licensed, regulated digital asset custodian in Korea. We provide a range of custody and asset service capabilities, such as asset tokenization, stablecoin support for principally institutional clients, really execute their business and investment strategies in Korea and regionally.
Brilliant. So the South Korea digital asset market has been dominated by the retail segment. Can we touch on some of the trends that you're seeing in the marketplace that's opening this up and changing that dynamic?
I think Korea is very unique among many of the jurisdictions around the world, where the entire market really started from retail, and retail really helped scale the market. Back in 2013 was when our first crypto exchange was launched, Corbit. And then in 2016 and 2017, Upbit and BitThumb launched. And riding the bull wave, significant retail capital flowed into these exchanges. And it reached a peak earlier this year when Korean retail volume constituted about 20% of the global transaction volume for cryptocurrency trading. And at one point, the transaction volume on our exchanges exceeded that of our equities market. From a regulator standpoint, this could be quite alarming. Without retail, without institution, retail has grown this sector immensely. And if we introduce institutional volume, then the impact would be uncertain and good or bad, uncertain and definitely immense. So the regulators over the past 10 years has taken a very cautious approach to allowing institutions to participate in the digital asset ecosystem. But starting in 2024, with the passage of a very important landmark legislation in Korea in July, the regulators started looking at the space a little bit differently. For about 18 months, the regulators didn't provide any licenses, new licenses for custodians. And just last year, we were one of the first ones to be licensed in Korea as a digital asset custodian. And in February, the regulators released a very structured, phased entry roadmap for institutions to participate now in the digital asset space. So already in Korea, you have academic institutions and nonprofit organizations that are already onboarded with centralized exchanges and trading their own accounts. And as we go into the latter part of this year, in Q3 and Q4, we're going to see for-profit companies, asset managers, and listed companies starting for the first time to onboard to centralized exchanges and actively engaging in the digital asset space. From our standpoint, it's important for us to serve the institutional demand as they're coming in, especially with our regulators recommending that institutions, by default, use third-party custody to deploy their assets across different venues. So really, I think the entire industry started off from a retail-focused growth, and now with increasing regulation and the catalyst being the regulatory clarity, inviting more institutions to participate in the digital asset ecosystem.
Great. You talked about the regulation changes, and there was a recent change in government. How do you see that kind of impacting the speed up of an adoption of digital assets for institutions?
So if we had this conversation, let's say 2 weeks ago, I think my response would be very much different. As you may know, in Korea, there was a snap presidential election that happened last week, and we elected a very populist president. Before this president, President Yoon adopted the Financial Services Commission, which is the highest regulatory body in Korea, under President Yoon, adopted a very restrictive stance to digital assets. And again, understandably so, in the name of investor protection. But with this new administration, immediately they brought in and introduced a bill that comprehensively will change fundamentally how digital assets are viewed, digital assets are regulated in Korea. Just to give you a couple of examples. Previously in Korea, Bitcoin ETFs, spot ETFs were just talking points. But now the new presidential administration is saying that that is one of the things that will happen in the next 6 to 12 months. You may see some of the updates recently about Korean won stablecoins. Korean stablecoin, again, was something that was just talked about, more of a conceptual academic exercise, but now they're allowing for a license regime for private issuers to start issuing stablecoins in Korea. And from a custodian standpoint, to become that enabling factor for various projects, different clients, to really get back into the digital asset space and introduce innovative products and services is really where we are strategically positioned to serve the market.
I guess with institutions, is there appetite in this space? Are they open to the adoption? They've got the clarity now. Will they lean into this space?
So as I mentioned, in Korea, for about 10 years, we didn't have any retail participation. But of course, that doesn't mean that retail wasn't there. And unfortunately, there's no official data that I can point to saying that there's immense institutional interest and institutional demand for access into the digital asset ecosystem. But just to give you a couple of anecdotal data points, one of the first, I think, adoption that's going to occur is on the stablecoin side. So right now on Upbit, which is Korea's largest exchange, about 10 to 15% of the daily volume is with stablecoin and Korean won pair. If you also look at cross-border remittances, if you compare the data from 2023 and 2024, and you see, or if you assume that the economic activity in Korea hasn't really changed between those 2 years, there is a delta on the amount of fiat remittances, and that delta is about 10 to 15%. So already there are institutions, companies, not just asset managers and those involved in institutional trading, that are using digital assets in a real use case manner. And I think with updated regulation, all those companies, all those activities will be brought to the surface within the regulatory framework.
I think it's excellent timing that you got licensed late last year. You've got all these changes in the market. What do you see as the biggest opportunity for BDAX?
I think regulatory changes, the landscape in Korea is really changing in real time. Just last night, I spent quite a few number of hours just reading through the draft legislation. And as I mentioned, we did elect a populist president, and so it's really his initiative right now to basically promise a lot of things in the market. But going forward, I think there's three key categories where digital asset custodians can really make an impact. One is spot ETFs. So spot ETF is something that traditional finance institutions in Korea, banks and security firms have been asking for a very long time. And as a digital asset custodian, to be able to support this merging of the traditional finance and digital asset is, I think, going to be a very key opportunity for us as we essentially become the collateral management, regulated collateral management facility in country. Secondly is the stablecoin. As I mentioned, about 10 to 15% of the foreign remittance transactions, daily trading volume is with Korean won to stablecoin pairs. And with the introduction of KRW stablecoin, to be able to provide a regulated custodial infrastructure for companies and asset managers and other businesses to deploy and custody their stablecoins, I think is going to be an important role that custodians will be able to play. And that is something that exchanges currently would have difficulty, given the scope of the capabilities, would be able to provide the market. And finally, we're going to have more institutions coming in. As I mentioned, there is that roadmap that now in Q3 and Q4 of this year, institutions, asset managers, and listed companies will be able to trade crypto and digital assets. And the recommendation by our regulators is that they use fundamentally third-party custody as their default mode of operations. And so rather than putting their assets on exchange, you're going to see institutions put their assets in custody and deploy it across different venues using custody as that regulated platform. And for us as a digital asset custodian, to increase market access, to provide value-added capabilities for institutions who are looking to custody and deploy their assets through a custody platform is going to be another important conversation that we're going to have in the next 6 to 12 months.
I'll be very predictable with my questioning. We talked about the opportunity. Where are the challenges in your eyes?
So I think one of the challenges that I'm facing as a company right now is market sentiment. The Korean digital asset ecosystem really grew with centralized exchanges driving the growth. So right now, if you look at Korea, centralized exchanges are playing the role of a trading venue, they're playing the role of custodians, and they're also playing the role of market makers. So when institutions are coming in for the first time in Korea, they're going to start asking questions about what is the value proposition for custody and to deploy their assets from custody. Why not just move all that asset into an exchange and trade directly on exchange? But of course, as we all know, there are pitfalls to having that massive counterparty risk against an exchange. And so from an adoption of custody operationally and for institutions to start internalizing the need for custody, I think is going to be an important sentiment changing challenge going forward.
I think we can all agree custody is at the core of the business and how institutions will engage and adopt. How do you look at building services and products on top of that to add value to those institutions?
I think the days of custodians just providing a regulated venue to safeguard client assets has really evolved. And it's starting to become difficult for custodians to justify the cost burden for institutions to custody their assets with us by charging them a custody fee. I think really custodians will have to evolve to become an enabling factor for the institutions. On the asset management, asset trading side, to provide prime services, to provide lending and other value-add facilities that allows institutions to build and manage their portfolio from custody. For businesses who are looking to build real-world use cases like RWAs and stablecoins, to be able to provide a comprehensive platform that allows them to manage the entire life cycle of, for instance, RWAs and stablecoin is a strategic role that I think custodians will begin to play going forward, especially because exchanges in Korea will not be able to provide comparable services because they'll be limited to their core functionality as a trading venue.
So BDAX works with a range of partners, and as we briefly touched upon, that could be offering different services that are on top of your core offering. What's your view on partnering with global businesses like Ripple and your sort of strategy that aligns with global partners and that reach?
Finance, traditional finance, I think, is fundamentally jurisdictional. So you have your domestic equities market, you have your cap control, forex control, you have your domestic banking infrastructure. But fundamentally, digital asset is very different. It's borderless, it moves at the speed of light, it always is on 24 hours, 7 days a week. And for institutions in Korea who are coming into the digital asset space for the first time, I think it's going to be a very different environment for them to operate. But as they start to become much more sophisticated, much more used to the dynamics of digital assets, I think they're going to start looking beyond the Korean borders and start seizing looking for international opportunities. And to be able to provide an in-country custodial platform that allows institutions in Korea to operate and to transact with international companies, I think is going to be an important role that custodians will play. And for us to work with global partners who already are at the forefront, who are already working with digital assets globally, and to introduce those capabilities, those know-how, those domain experience in Korea, I think will better allow us to serve institutional demand and clients in Korea. And overall, just be prepared to offer forward-looking solutions as the digital asset for institutions start scaling up in Korea as we go into the latter part of this year and definitely in 2027.
Fantastic. I think the Korean market's obviously very competitive in this space. As you mentioned, you have centralized exchanges. There are also a number of other custodians in the market. What do you think the key factor is in being successful in that space?
I think fundamentally, as I mentioned, custodians have to be more than an agent for safeguarding client assets. You have to start building value-add services that allows institutions to really accelerate their entry into the digital asset ecosystem. And from the very beginning, when I was creating a vision for my company, for BDAX, we wanted BDAX to become much more than a custodian to provide these value-added services. It's almost reflected in our name. So BDAX is an acronym for Beyond Digital Asset Custody Service. To be able to offer these sort of value-added services that leverage custody rather than custody being the end goal and the product for institutional clients is, I think, what really separates us from our competition who are much more focused at providing the core custody infrastructure for institutions in Korea.
And what's the relationship, I guess, going a bit deeper into that with TradFi and custodians? You have a lot of major banks in Korea. Is it a supportive relationship? How does the kind of dynamic work with a licensed custodian for digital assets versus the traditional bank?
The Korean digital asset ecosystem developed in a very skewed, very unorthodox way. Right now, even for centralized exchanges, in order to on-ramp with an exchange, there's only one bank that works exclusively with each custodian. So in other words, Upbit, for instance, you could only on-ramp fiat through one bank, Bithumb with only one bank. And this was the regulator's way of controlling the fiat on-ramp and off-ramp into crypto space. For better or worse, the regulators adopted essentially the same model for digital asset custodians. So there are 4 Tier 1 commercial banks in Korea, and each commercial bank works exclusively with one custodian. And that, I think, is how the traditional finance, especially the banks, are looking to come into this space by working with custodians rather than with exchanges to offer products and services that are differentiated from the trading functionalities of the exchanges and providing more products and services that are really tailored to their own clients rather than just being a one-trick pony, if you will, providing trading services.
That's a fantastic opportunity. I mean, we see it at Ripple. It's bridging that gap between DeFi and TradFi. And as soon as you see TradFi leading into that, you're going to see huge growth in those markets. So that's it's super exciting. We've got about 2.5 minutes left. I'd like to finish off with an outlook question. So what do you kind of predict for the Korean market over the next 12 to 18 months?
I think a lot of things are happening in real time. As I mentioned, our president and the associated lawmakers just introduced a very comprehensive bill that is really going to be transformative for the digital asset space in Korea. A lot of the functionalities, a lot of the products and services that were not allowed for the last 5 to 6 years are now going to be permitted. For instance, like ICOs and margin trading. And even on the stablecoin front, KRW stablecoin is something that's being aggressively promoted. So you're going to see, in my view, a lot of uncertainty, unfortunately, and chaos as private sector players such as ourselves are trying to navigate the changing regulatory landscape. But after maybe 12 months, we're going to see consolidation. We're going to see which of the many promises that the current administration has made actually takes hold. And I think as a digital asset custodian, because we do have the regulatory first mover advantage, we'll be in a position to monitor and take measured steps to support institutions as they come into the digital asset space for the first time in Korea.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. I know Ripple is a strong partner of yours in the custody technology world. We look forward to continue that partnership and very excited to see what the Korean market has in store for BDAX.
We'll look forward to advancing our partnership and really introducing innovative and forward-looking products in Korea together.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you.